The first category we're going to cover is ribs. Now obviously there's various different types. You've got spare ribs or baby backs. Today we've chosen baby backs to do. Nice and simple, good size, good shape. Unfortunately they're not particularly meaty. You will need to special order meaty ribs from your butcher. So we will go through the process here. All we're looking to do initially is on the back there's a membrane. And the idea is to try and remove that membrane, which makes the rib meat a lot more tender once it's cooked. You don't want people to be chewing meat off the bone and then having a bit of membrane at the back, which makes it tough and chewy. Now the easiest way to do this is to just get your knife and slide it across the bone at the back. And if you lift it slightly, you'll see the membrane starts pulling away. And once you've lifted it a little bit, take a piece of kitchen roll, and the reason why you use kitchen roll is for the grip, and you can just put it underneath the membrane and then pull, and the membrane should come off in one piece. After you've removed the membrane, just have a look through and see if there's any additional little bits of fat that you can trim off. Now remember, the amount of time that you're cooking the ribs, this means the fat in the meat actually renders down, so it's important to keep quite a nice fat content in there. So for example on this, to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't really touch it at all. You've got a nice amount of meat in between the bones with just a little bit of fat that will render down nicely. Now that we've trimmed down our ribs, the idea of competition barbecue is one bite barbecue, so we need to make sure the flavour has as much impact as possible. The first thing we're going to do with our ribs today is actually put some soft brown sugar on. Now the idea is we'll put the sugar on, we'll let it rest for a while, and that sugar will turn into a liquid form and turn into a syrup and start sinking into the meat. So that's our basis of the barbecue today. So what you do, you just get the sugar and rub it straight down the bag. Now I'm not going to be able to use this, I'm not going to be using this sugar for anything else, so no comments about not changing my gloves, because after I've finished here it's going on to a few other bits of meat and then that's me done. So give it a good rub. You don't want any lumps on it. If you have any lumps during the cooking process, they might not turn into a liquid, and if the judge bites it and cracks their teeth on a sugar crystal, obviously you're going to be out of the competition. You're going to have a very upset judge as well. Right, so now we've done those, we're just going to leave them to sit for as long as you want. As it's sugar, it's not going to affect the type of finish on the meat. It's not like a rub which has got a salt content which could start curing your pork. So we can leave that in overnight if you want to. We're going to be leaving it for about half an hour, which will just give it enough time for the sugar to actually start melting. Now the ribs have been resting in the sugar for about half an hour, you'll be able to see that there's a syrup that's formed over the top of them. You can see it running down there. Now that's ideal. What we want to make sure before we rub them is that there's no additional lumps. So again, just go quickly over each one, run your hands across it, because feel is always the best way to discover if there's anything there. And you'll see the sugar has actually added colour already to the meat. Now the next stage is to put your rub on there. And for this, I will be changing my glove. To stop any cross-contamination with this, it's always going to be a dry glove for the rub, and then with the other hand I'll rub it in. So again, put your rub over both sides and make sure you get the edges as well. Now our ribs have had time to rest, what we're going to do is put them on the barbecue. Now the method we're using here, and anyone can do it with any type of barbecue at home rather than just for competition, is offset. So you'll notice in the barbecue we've got the coals down one area, and then this area there's nothing. So there's no direct heat coming from the bottom up onto the meat. So this is just called an indirect method, and it doesn't matter what size grill you've got, you can always use this. Now one for the ribs. Looking fantastic. Now all we're going to do on this is close the lid and then just monitor it. But remember, we can slow cook this way because the coals are removed from directly underneath the meat. And there we go. Okay, so now it's time to have a quick look at our ribs. They've been on for 2.5 hours now. Because they're baby back, they're quite small, so they're going to cook a lot quicker. Unlike the other pieces of meat, you can't tell via temperature, so you really need to have a feel, and you want a nice bend in them, so we'll see where we're up to. Feels pretty good to me. I mean, you go much more than that and you've got a risk of them falling apart, and you don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do now is give them a bit of a baste with a bit of sauce, and then we'll leave them for probably about ½ hour and give the sauce time to set. This really is your last opportunity before the sauce sets. If you see anything that stands out that you want to adjust, then make sure you take it out. For example, there's some little bits that look like sugar here. Just pull those off, because this sauce is going to make them very sticky, and you've got a bit of heat from the rub that you've used. Again, you want to make sure they're pretty much well covered. The judge could take a bite from the end, from the middle, from the top. So give them a good covering. And literally you're just setting this sauce. So again, ½ hour, and these will be ready. So now the ribs, the sauce has had time to set on the ribs. It's time to slice them. We need to find ribs that are as uniform as possible when it comes to judging. So it's a case of slicing them all up. If we can keep the racks together, then obviously when you put them in the box, they will sit perfectly next to each other. Right, so now the ribs have been chopped, I can have a look at them and see which ones are presenting. So I only need 6 in the box, but what I'll do is choose those 5. choose those 5. And those, and present as such. So that will nicely fill up your box. I'll just turn that round to show. So you've got a nice selection of ribs. They're all the same size. You've got different markings on the outside, but that's always going to happen. You can't always get that 100%, but that would be considered a nice full box. And as you can see, the ribs are nicely cooked inside. And don't taste bad at all.